Never dabble in witchcraft, or hang out with anybody who dabbles in witchcraft. You will unlock horrors that are not meant to be on this earth. Back in 1999, I used to work for a computer store that doubled as a small internet cafe. It was called Dog and Dogs Computers. Now, I applied for the job there, even though I'm a white Norwegian forest cat. 2 dogs owned the shop, a big bulldog, who was the owner, and a Jack Russell Terrier, who was a landlord. I knocked on the door and showed great enthusiasm for computers as soon as he opened the door. The bulldog was quite taken aback and hired me on the spot. Business was going well for a few months, until the lease expired, and the owner wanted double the rent after the lease was renewed. So the bulldog made a deal with the landlord to give up half the space and only run a computer repair shop. Unfortunately, the boss had a devious plan to make up for the loss of business space. A Y2K computer scam, where people send in their computers to get rid of the Y2K bug. And he would upsell them by getting them to buy unnecessary upgrades and software installations, sometimes even a whole new computer depending on how rich they looked. People came in droves and fell for it. We got so many customers we had to temporarily close shop just to keep up with demand. When Y2K turned out to be false, the bulldog packed as much as he could and left, leaving behind 6 computers. I was suddenly unemployed, without references, and I needed cash fast because the rent was due in 2 weeks. So I wandered around town, looking for any help wanted signs at local businesses. Unexpectedly, I saw a help wanted sign at a place called Foley's End. I applied for a janitor's position out of desperation and met up with a monkey called Sean Twinkleheart, the owner of Foley's End. He was a very friendly and outgoing. I could tell I was going to enjoy working there. The place was a cafe hangout spot for young adults, with computers to play video games on, lots of tables, chair couches, a pool table, and a video game console hooked up to a large TV on carts, along with a long kitchen with all sorts of food preparation appliances. The place had an industrial underground feel to it, even though it was on the top floor of a 2-story building. Everything was fine for a few years until I met up with a wolf with dark gray fur, with yellow piercing eyes, wearing a black trench coat and a black fedora. He played pool for a while as I cleaned around him. I noticed he had an intoxicating, dangerous aura about him that enthralled me into wanting to get him to know him more. To my regret, I did. His name was Lark Grayday. After talking to him for a few hours, I found myself drifting into a daydream-like state. While in this state, my actions went into autopilot, and months went by in a blink of an eye. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the middle of a demonic ritual happening at his house, with him carving strange symbols into my left shoulder with a single sharp claw. When the wolf went on a bathroom break, I gathered my things and bolted for the door. Next day, I went back to work and found Lark Grayday carving strange symbols everywhere. On the pool table, on the top of doorways, next to light switches, every normal mundane point of interest where there were symbols. By the time he was finished, he was caught by Sean Twinkleheart. Lark Grayday was permanently banned from the hangout place. Little to realize, he had placed a curse on the entire floor. Sean simply painted over the scratch marks and thought nothing of it. 2 weeks later, the owner mysteriously died of cancer. Fortunately, I acquired employment from a house owner, a blue cobalt named Tim. He allowed me to move into his place and pay cheap rent. After moving in, we exchanged recent stories of our lives. I told him about my encounter with Lark Grayday, and Tim told me he was a Cobalt church member of a church called the Church of Latter-day Yips, where they worship the celestial dragon. He also told me that Lark Grayday used to live in the very same apartment I was in, but he was kicked out due to his abusive behavior and vandalism. Lark Grayday carved demonic symbols in the basement of the house to summon a demon from the floor. Fortunately, Tim caught him before he completed the ritual. Lark got violent with Tim. The police were phoned. The wolf got hauled away by the police, and before he was shoved into a cruiser, He cursed the house he was living in. Tim, in a panic, gathered all the ritual items in the basement, threw them into a garbage bag, and threw the bag into a trash bin at a park just down the hill from the house. I was shocked at the story, but relieved that Tim had enough sense to get rid of the demonic items out of the house. Everything seemed to be normal for a few years. Little did the landlord know. The energy inside the garbage bags leaked out because local wildlife nipped and teared at the bags looking for food. The energy pooled at the lowest section of the parkland, gathering more and more negative energy as people walked by, like a living puddle of gasoline waiting for that spark. Tim was the coolest landlord I ever had because he outfitted his entire room for the purpose of video games, cable TV, and movies. It started out with him having a very large television, and then later on upgraded to a full HD projector connected to a PS3, Xbox 360, and a Nintendo GameCube. We played all sorts of first-person shooters, horror games, racing games, and 3D platformer games. Unfortunately, our fun came to a sudden end a few years later. A very hate-filled ritual happened in the park. Lark Grayday was out of jail and causing another disturbance, sending one final blast of negative energy to the lowest parts of the park. He quickly retreated back to his new place of residence at an unknown location as a portal ignited open. August 31st, 2008, 3 p.m. I was on my computer at the time, noticing a very dark presence in the distance. I didn't think much of it until it started to get closer and closer. As it got closer, I started noticing it more. It eventually got so close that I could hear people screaming as it walked by them. The dark presence walked on all fours, low to the ground. It had the body of an alligator, so black and radiant with darkness that you could see it straight through a wall. It had the head of a cat with glowing yellow eyes and 3 columns of spines going down its back to the base of the tail. My body was frozen with an all-consuming fear as it approached my apartment. I felt that if I were out there standing in front of it, it would not only consume me physically, but my soul as well, and I would cease to exist entirely. I used with what little strength I had to play Pillar, a Christian rock band. I cranked it loud. That loud music took away the fear a little bit. And soon I realized that my landlord was seeing the same thing and initiated an emergency callback prayer. Suddenly, a blast of fire shot down from the sky and caused the dark presence to disintegrate into dust. A large dragon flew down and landed on the ground next to the charred remains, sniffing at it for any signs of life. Jumped, and then flew into the air. The presence was gone. I flopped onto my bed and cried for hours. After I got a hold of myself, I went to my landlord and explained what I saw. He told me he saw exactly the same thing and to tell no one of this occurrence. After a decade, I thought it would be safe to share this story. I really don't care if people don't believe this incident occurred. I experienced it and made sure to write down all the details before locking it away for several years so that I could be recovered enough to share it with the world. After that incident, I moved out a year later and stayed far away from anyone who practices witchcraft. I've never had anything like that ever happen to me again. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please press that like button. Also, I have a doppelganger on a YouTube channel called Lighthouse Horror. Thank you and good night.